Good evening to everybody, and welcome to our school lecture series on behalf of myself and Director Professor Sophie Delay. We are very happy to present you another episode of our lecture series, which is this semester devoted to the theme of housing and possible ways actually to build or to develop affordable housing. And of course, affordable housing is a very large spectrum of possibilities that can go from public housing to social housing to also private housing, which will be the case tonight. I'm very, very happy to introduce to you Plan Común, who is tonight represented by Kim Courrèges and Felipe de Ferrari. They are actually very active and very well-known practice based in Paris. And in the last decade, they really have made a name for themselves, especially in the question of housing. I mean, they develop very interesting projects about domestic space of all kinds of different scales, but also different kind of clients or commissions. And tonight they are going to show a project which is Maison Commune, which is also the place where they live. But actually what is really interesting about this project is that it was a self-commission. So in a way, Kim and Felipe and the team of Plan Común, they became like developers in order to not be developers. Because the idea of self-commission is also a way to avoid all the pitfalls that often come from traditional mindsets in terms of developing a project. And I found this actually a very interesting position because, of course, this is not something new. There is a number of very good architects that often took that risky position to develop their own ideas in the most straightforward and radical terms. And in fact, it seems to me, but this is something that I will also leave to Kim and Felipe, it seems to me that this project is also a kind of manifesto in a way of your work, of your approach. So again, this also has a long tradition of architects building their own house as a sort of manifesto about what architecture can be. I mean, John Soane in Lincoln Fields maybe is the most obvious example. So I'm very much looking forward to this lecture. And before actually we start, I also want to thank all the people that made this lecture series possible. Of course, Elena Chiavi Maripege, but also the ArchiZoom team and our very precious students, assistants who really take care of many aspects of this lecture, so we don't take for granted all these efforts, which are a big thing for us. But without further ado, Kim, Felipe, thank you for being here, and we very much looking forward to your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Pier, Vittorio, Sophie. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and it's somehow also very nice to see friends from that we met in Chile, Chileans, but also people from abroad that somehow we are all here. It's very, very nice. The presentation is entitled Architecture of Commons, and we will introduce La Maison Commune, as Pier Vittorio said before. But obviously, we will do a short introduction so you will understand, let's say, the position that this project has in a way in the studio. No? So very briefly, just to as kind of a summary, Plan Común was founded in 2012 in Chile. We were based in Chile for 6 years until 2018. And actually, the idea since the very beginning, since the name, and since we decided to have a practice, was to really try to reinforce collectivity, to reinforce or to maximize collective spaces, shared spaces, because as you might know, we come from a context which is quite neoliberal, is the extreme neoliberalism. It was a laboratory of neoliberalism, Chile, implemented during dictatorship, and it's quite extreme. All our life there is commodified, it's mercant, it's part of the market, no? So as in the very beginning, as young, let's say, practitioners, after leaving the school, the idea was to really to try to have an answer from within the discipline and from within the project, the designing projects, no? In a way, this image summarized quite well somehow the struggle in between culture and capital and the way can operate, no? It's by a Chilean artist called Alfredo Yac, no? This is, in a way, a very important moment of the practice. It was probably the first project we launched in the practice. It was actually somehow a research inspired by many other research and many colleagues. No, it was really to try to find strategies to maximize collective space. It included this kind of very vast amount of people, young architects, the vast majority, and the idea was to really, through very simple format, one isometry, one text, to have a potential strategy that decision makers, other people can somehow take as a model, no, or as a kind of idea. And it's important because in this, what you see here is there is a display. People were saying all people is architect, no, which is something we like to believe also, that architecture is not done by experts, but actually by people with using strategic knowledge, common sense, and not more, no, not much more. In a way, this is also very summary. This is the reality is much more complex than this, but in the presentation we will go through three main ideas mainly: architecture as a common field of knowledge, the idea of the architecture of commons, and the idea of the self-commission or self-initiative, or the idea to find a project, no, to develop. The two last ones. The architecture as a common field of knowledge and self-commission, they are somehow informed by parallel projects that we will also explain, introduce you briefly. So it's also important to say that since the very beginning, Plan Común, it's a flexible structure. No, we have been dealing with different phases. We were quite established, or let's say established, in Chile during 6 years. And then we decided to re-establish the practice in Paris, which is not evident because our practice was laptops and not a lot of and a bunch of quantity of projects. But we decided to move, and you see that there are many phases at the moment, or let's say three main phases. We have now the studio is based in Paris, but also in Chile, in Santiago. We have a partner there, and the current structure in Paris is by the three of us, Kim, me, and Nisim Hagenauer, the third partner, which unfortunately he cannot be here as well because of other commitments. So we have this also very important. So you situate it's a practice founded in 2012. So already 12 years of already 12 years of practice now. So in the beginning, we could say during the first time, we went through this kind of developing the practice as a project with this attitude towards commissions, towards self-commissions, and so on and so forth. Then there is the re-establishment in France, where it's mainly about housing in different formats and reuse of buildings. And the third phase, which is somehow in the middle, reopening. It's fair enough. Yes, reestablishing the studio in Chile, but also having this idea of self-commission. So
we could summarize that the phase one is like developing these ideas about collective space and facilities, and the phase two in France is applying these ideas to collective housing, among other projects, but mostly collective housing. And now the phase three with re-establishing the practice also in South America and expanding this idea of self-commission that we will explain later.
So first part, just to have you don't get lost, is about the architecture as a common field of knowledge, no? And it's to understand our practice as a weaving of received ideas. We were formed somehow, at least me in Chile, with the idea that somehow architects we are very special people, kind of geniuses, and then there was the attempt in Chile to bring these new stars, at least in our school, we could say. Alfredo Tierman, he is part of the same school. And we have this golden generation or something like that, you know, golden generation, people, very well-known architects, very important, very good designers, but it was a little bit conflicted for us, no? So, and we, since we were students, we started with a project of talking with architects, with colleagues, and also filming architecture. And this project now, since 2008, we started with Diego Gras, another Chilean architect, also from the same school. And we have this archive of architectures, no? Buildings, but also discourses, people that is doing research in front of people which is quite into the project, into very like a material world and so on and so forth. And all this is a vast archive where we are obviously taking some lessons and learning from our colleagues, no? Of course, this is an idea, it's very opportunistic in a way, but since during the last 6 years, we have been dealing with a lot of, with housing, collective housing. We take the advantage to visit several cases and we try to learn from these examples, obviously with a certain already filter about appropriation, about the sequences of common spaces and so on and so forth. The idea of the extra spaces, the generous balconies, winter gardens, etc., etc. But also, which is quite important, to understand the conditions of the buildings, not to only be amazed by the aesthetic condition of them, but to try to understand all the conditions, political, economical, social, and so on and so forth. That's why it's quite important to talk with the architects, no? In this case, Lacaton and Basal and Druot.
And sometimes with some architects quite insistently, and like several interviews and filming several of their projects to insist also on their discourse and to establish a dialogue with them.
It's quite important also that it's the first part is about the ideas, but also it's a way that we found. It was a kind of nice coincidence. We collaborate with a few of these practices already, and it's a very good way to start in a way, no?
Another idea that we use a lot is the one of poor architecture, defined by Lina Bobardi as like in the sense of craftsmanship, expressing maximum communication and dignity through minor and humble means. And this is really an idea in which we want to insist in our projects. And so now the collective housing, this question is like a very urgent and universal question. As you can see, it is like a really broader question than only in architecture. And you see that, for instance, in 2019 in Chile, in the social movement, there was also this reclaiming of housing, proper housing, and let's say decent housing for everyone. And you see, like in a very emblematic example of housing, it's already almost a piece of city, made a building by Niemeyer in São Paulo, the Copan building, where you see the need for more and the use during pandemics, the use of the brise-soleil that make like this identity of this wavy building are used by the inhabitants to have more and extra space from their housing.
Which is extremely interesting in the image, because this situation actually, it happens before the pandemic. So as soon as there is an available space outside your apartment, it means it can be potentially appropriated, no?
There is also the idea of intermediate space, and the definition made by Glenda Kapstein, who's an architect and researcher from Chile, who studied the northern, let's say, typical dwelling, vernacular dwelling in the northern part of Chile, in the desert, and who defines the intermediate space like this. There are space where the inhabitants feel as free as in a controlled interior, but that integrates natural elements. There are a small world that can be ordered, transformed, and domesticated, so appropriated. and the in-between condition, there are an articulating space of the totality of the places that make up the program of the dwelling. And so for us, a very interesting example of this intermediate space in collective housing is the circulations of the Cité Napoléon. Let's say one of the first social housing in Paris, or sort of social housing in Paris. And with this circulation in the center of the plot under a glass roof, and with these passerelles giving extensions to the housing towards the collective space.
It is quite important also that forms, architectural spaces are available in time, no? So one thing that can be a tool for control in one period, it can be a place for pleasure and collective joy, no? In another time, after a few years, no? Which is the condition a little bit now.
And so this intermediate space, as we understand it, there is this in-between conditions, no inside, no outside. There is this idea of extra space as defined by Lacaton-Vassal. It's an unsolicited space. As such, it's an asset without yield. It's a space for life and freedom, spatial compensation, added special value, and something else. One of the first projects that we did in Paris is this competition for social housing in the south of Paris, inside Paris, let's say, in a former hospital. And it's a project we do together with Claude Malvezzi and Nicolas Dorval-Bory. It's for social housing operator in Paris, and it's 183 housing with activities on the floor, on the ground floor. And so it's a load-bearing stone building with the timber structure inside, but what's important for us, and it's the intermediate quality of this space in between the housing, the blocks of housing, let's say.
This is quite important because actually all the will that we have about maximizing public collective space in Chile, naive or somehow over-dimensioned, then coming back to a real concrete brief, let's say, has this form and this kind of proportion, no? In a way.
And so it's a very dense neighborhood, as you can see. It's so you can have an idea. It's 56 by 56 square, the plot, and with the 25 by 25 meter courtyard in the center. It's let's say a hybrid form between a building as a block and a series of buildings emerging from a common plinth. And so what articulates all this housing are these four elements, these four devices that are the vertical commons and this sequence of commons. So these are basically the open air platforms that are partially protected from the climate with the glass facade on the outside. And as you can see, these are like the housing units organizing around these platforms. And so these are like over-scale circulations that can be used for other uses. And so, and they have a specific character and quality with these ceramic tiles, green ceramic tiles on the facades, and this glass bricks dome on top.
It's also important, this is social housing in Paris, which is obviously, you might be perhaps more
aware of this generosity in cooperative system or different housing system in Switzerland, but French context is quite oppressive in a way. The lack of space we notice every day. So already if we arrive to bring something more, we are somehow already happy.
And so these four almost autonomous devices that bring this identity to the building, that are, let's say, the central subject in this project. As you can see, we are now on the building, and this is also a specific object, like the prototype for this vertical commons with this glass facades and ceramic tiles that you could see on the image. And so this idea, from this project, we developed this idea of almost having an autonomous device for commons in all the collective housing projects. So, for instance, in this rehabilitation, that it's a competition that we did with 51 and Foyer for housing, social housing tower, transformed into student housing, where this device takes, it's like an addition on one of the facades. Let's say we have additions on the four facades, but you have like this crossing common areas that are going from one addition to the other through the building. In this case, it's almost like a piece of furniture that makes this autonomous device. In this case, in Strasbourg, a project that we did with the developer that we are currently developing, actually, and where this device take another form, and it's like also big platforms, but outdoor areas, and there is also an extra space on the ground floor for common areas.
And the idea, in a way, with this, through this series, we have been developing this sequence of commons from the city to the last floor, no? It can be in horizontal order, it can be in vertical circulation, it can be an atrium or whatever the typology, but actually is to find the scale and proportion and character of these spaces, no?
And this project in Montevideo in Uruguay, which we are doing with Adamo Faiden from Argentina, and it's also a self-commission. And you have also these two blocks separated by a courtyard and all the commons going around this courtyard.
So we will start now with the case for this presentation, no? Basically, it's a project, we will review, let's say, different phases of this project. There you have the main, let's say, kind of data and all the collaborators. Obviously, we are not working alone. We have collaborators in the office, interns, and many people, colleagues also that were part of the project, no? But let's start with the context, no? So the house is actually, it's not in Paris, it's in the city of Pantin, which is really in the north next to Paris, no? If you see here, is the La Villette Park over there. So for the ones that know, that have visited Paris, it's over there. And then we are a little bit in the north, and then just to have a reference, we are 15 or 20 minutes by bike to the main Gare du Nord and Gare de l'Est train station, no? It's also quite interesting about this place, it's quite funny, that it's really next to the second biggest cemetery in Europe, which is quite something, no? It's around 112 hectares or something like this. And it's a coincidence because we spent 5 years researching on the cemetery in Santiago, the main cemetery in Santiago, as a metropolitan garden. So to be there, just next to the cemetery, even if it's quite different than the one in Santiago, it's somehow interesting. But also, if you see more in detail, it's this island in between, like it's kind of, you could say, a very industrial place, a place where obviously the things that the city doesn't in the center, let's say, There are a lot of industries around the cemetery, creating this huge limit. And then there is this small, very small neighborhood as an island in between, no?
Yeah, it was a small residential area. Initially, it was workers' houses for the butchers of La Villette. La Villette was like the slaughterhouse, the biggest slaughterhouse in Paris. So it's a small residential enclave inside this industrial area that is still in use. Small industrial.
And there is even a kind of association of the quartier, of the district, of the small neighborhood, where like people organize already. So there is the situation more in plan, let's say, a small neighborhood surrounded, enclosed by industries, let's say, of different kind. And then the first, coming back to the idea of self-commission, the initiative, let's say, that we took from the studio, and actually with a very specific expertise by our partner Nissim Hagenauer in looking to find the investment, to find this investment in order to buy the house and to start a project. No, you see the rough numbers over there. The idea was to actually to meet people, a very close bunch of people, let's say, for bringing this idea of rent building, not for selling apartments, no?
Yes. The idea is The idea is to use like the savings of people that they would put them in other investments anyway, or at the bank or whatever, but and to use it like the initial investment for this project. That's also a prototype. We will go further later, but we were kind of lucky. As you can see, we didn't bought a plot, but we bought a house, an existing house. And we were kind of lucky because, of course, there was a developer on who was interested, but there was a misreading by him about the urban regulation that was at our advantage, and that's how we got to buy it instead of him.
It's very important to see the house, and this is the only time you will see the proper house because it's not there anymore. The idea, the first project actually, the preliminary project actually, was to build an extension of this project, of this house, no? And to build already the shared space. We will go through this detail also about regulation because we could have one floor more over there, but we decided to have the greenhouse. But actually, after the studies, and this was let's say the documents we deliver to the municipality, let's say. But actually, through the studies, and you might be aware of the complexities of transforming, and which is sometimes more costly or whatever, we decided in the end that actually it was really difficult to keep the building. Why? Because
on the building site already, yes, where when we started to curate the building, we did like an investigation before in the walls, in the existing walls, but on site we discovered that the brick walls were actually not chained, not together. There was like 2 layers of bricks that were not linked, structurally linked, and so we had to demolish, and it was already a decision that we did on the building site.
But it was a decision. It was something we were, of course, we are influenced about this idea of keeping and finding the quality of this place, obviously. But then, of course, in the general context of the whole operation, in the end, with the difficulties of the material, let's say, condition, and let's say, the fragility of the ground also, we decided to build a new one. And this is what actually we introduced to the municipality as a new project, no? You might see that it's more or less the same. The sizes of windows are changing. They are bigger, they are more generous. Obviously, the structure is quite resistant, and we are trying to bring some qualities, some specific qualities that you will see afterwards. but basically this was already something in the process. We were able to adapt the project as we are doing as architects many times. No?
And yeah, and we were really doing the project on site and like drawing the plans almost at the same time we were building.
So in this case, it's also quite important, and we perhaps to clarify is actually what I was telling before, that potentially, as for the PLU, for the regulation, we could have one floor more. It means that one big apartment or two apartments, it doesn't matter. But actually, as we are trying to ask for more to each brief, it was the same for us, no? So we talked with the investors and we convinced them in a way that our approach was to have less density that will allow us, on the one side, to bring a more nice coexistence with the surroundings, with the houses on the sides because of the lack of light and so on and so forth, but also to bring these kind of important shared spaces for us, crowning the sequence.
Yeah, the volume that you see here, it could be all private housing, and only we had to do a little setback on the last floor, but not as much as this one. But actually, as we were minding our own business in this case, we were aware that the numbers were giving anyway without this extra floor of housing.
So this is the context. We are just next to this very big kind of hangar, industrial hangars in the back, let's say. This is the more enclosed neighborhood, the Saint-Chemin neighborhood, and you see somehow the landscape, the urban landscape, which is quite interesting and beautiful.
And as you can see, we are densifying a bit with regard to the existing situation, but with this extra floor as a translucent and let's say more open and generous. Instead of housing.
It is also important to say that the existing house was continuous facade, but actually it's an L going until the end of the plot over here. So actually we took the part in the front and we kept the house in the back of the courtyard, which saved around 40% of the original structure. You see over there a little bit of the context and the relationship with the building, let's say, and vice versa, and a little bit from far away where you see this greenhouse, no, on top.
And the cemetery, the wall of the cemetery on the right. So it was a small building. So it was too small for a crane, for instance. So we had to build. It has to be like a let's say, construction methods that could be held by two men, let's say. For instance, you see the glass house on top, the greenhouse on top. It's built with the same, with one same element of one section of timber that is used for the whole structure. With very simple, as you can see, connections and bracing elements. It's the same also for the housing with the concrete skeleton filled with prefab elements like concrete blocks for the walls or also for the slabs.
When we said simplicity always, is actually not totally true. Huh? We are let's say dealing with a lot of complexity in bigger projects because of regulation, because of administrations and so on and so forth, because of cultural differences, whatever. And in this case, it was again developed by us. We tried to bring some principles, some very clear ideas, no? The concrete skeleton, and then, as Kim is saying, just manipulate the things that you can move with your hands, no?
And so, yeah, more the same. And for the facades, so we wanted to use the fillings of reused bricks, because it was a bit of a gimmick that we had for a few projects that we were trying to because we were asked to build reuse elements in the projects, and it was always very difficult to do it for the structure or the facades. And so it was also a demonstration, an opportunity to demonstrate that it was possible in technical and also insurance term.
And in a way, we are tired also because when we are in front of this question, reuse, at least in, let's say, in the context where we are sometimes, is somehow reduced to take some lavabos or the toilets, no? And you recover some handrails, and then you put the handrails in another place, and it's nice, no? But it's more, it doesn't have the impact nor the scale of the building, no? So the idea to try to bring the reuse, this attitude, even though we know that we demolished the existing building, this is not necessarily kind of greenwashing, it's just to have kind of the reuse, to use a material which is reused at the scale of the whole building, no, of the full building. So for this we needed to do tests. We went to the Centre National of Matériaux Naturels, no? CNTMC, no?
So the bricks were from Belgium, where it's already they have also all the knowledge about reuse, especially of bricks. And it was much easier also to find a bunch of bricks, the amount of bricks that we needed from the same demolition. And it was also useful to have the demolitioner selling directly the bricks. And we could test a few bricks.
But we needed to test it because otherwise, because of insurance, French context, let's say, we needed to test them. We need to have a bureau de control for this, and we did actually. It's an amount of 12,000 bricks or something like this, and they take by chance, you know, they take 20, and they do this test for compression, and the resistance of these bricks, which are old, obviously, it's much more stronger than the ones that are being done now because of different high temperatures in doing them, no?
And so we, as you could see on the image that we presented for the building permit, we were thinking that okay, we will reuse bricks. We don't know what they will look like, so we will just paint them white. And as they arrive on the building site, we discovered that it was actually beautiful, so we kept them as on the facade towards the street with the, let's say, the traces of their former life. And also, but towards the inner courtyard, we painted them white to, let's say, also give unity to this outdoor space, delimited by 4 different walls of different qualities.
This was obviously not, it was a very tough decision. We were 4 partners, you know, and then sometimes partners were saying, okay, all white or all rough, no? At the one moment we said we don't need to decide. You never have this full comprehension of the building from the both sides, and we need the white in the courtyard because of the lack of light, and also the unity with the existing house, which is here, no? The one that you see here.
And so we were lucky also to find a constructor that was used to a bit bigger scale, and so he was. They were really comfortable on this rather small scale building, and yeah, it was an intense work of learning from each other and finding solutions together, since we were doing the project while we were building it.
And even also challenging the structural engineers. They said this guy, Mario Laporta, the owner of the company, he's coming from Sicily, and he was like doing bolts, like working with bricks, and you know, he has a lot of experience in building, and he was saying, okay, but we will not do the stairs as you are proposing because it's too big, too over-dimensioned. We will do it in another way. And we arrived to this very kind of thin stairs because of them, actually. They insisted, no?
Then you would see also about there is an issue about the door towards the street of the hall. And we worked for all the, as you can see, it's a rather, let's say, rough language, and we took special attention to all the railing and metal in the house, in the building. And we worked together with Charles Bédin, who is an architect but working as a metal worker, and to imagine all these elements that give also a special quality to the common areas of the building, like the railing on the facades.
So perhaps we can see briefly the domestic condition actually, and perhaps the only thing that we are trying to do, and this is perhaps not easy in all the projects, but actually is the idea that every square meter counts, no? That we try to kill corridors, monofunctional areas without light and without any condition besides to be a circulation, for example. So this is the part of the house we rehabilitated. It's very, all the houses are very simple, are very like in this house we just painted the existing structure, we added just a furniture, and this is more or less, we added a partition. The bathrooms, for example, they follow, obviously, all of them follow kind of the same principle with the ceramics and this this simple structure for the lavabo, let's say. To expose the structure, not in the existing house, obviously, but also in the new building. No, it's a little bit rough. We try to bring this kind of. Yeah, it's very simple. Huh? We see the columns. We see the structure of the ceiling just painted, and then you see the same type of structure with the lever for the inhabitants. Let's say each apartment has its own way to arrange their stuff. This is one apartment in the rez-de-chaussée, in the ground floor, let's say. This one is another studio in the first floor. This one is a bigger apartment, 2 bedrooms with for a couple and a child now. And you see different ways of living and using, obviously, appropriating what is there. No, for example, there they have the plants on the beam, which is quite fun. Then also there is this attempt also to deal with the domesticity and when the limits of the intimate world, the domestic world ends, no? And then when you have let's say the collective, try to blur these two, no? So we bring these translucent doors, no? So the idea, we saw doors at the moment as windows also, that you can gain light, but also some depth in your own apartments, in our own apartments, which are somehow tight in a way. So you can see, you can have the circulation as a kind of extension of your own apartment, no? And the negotiation in between different apartments is quite different. Here is totally open, in the other just with clothes, you find the way of covering a little bit, keeping your privacy, no? This is the biggest apartment in the second floor. It is by Nissim and Luis, which are also part of the investment. No, it's the same kind of project, just a little bit bigger. And then you see the exposition of the material. No.
So the cinque, as you can see, as you will see, also in this project, we of course follow the same idea of this sequence of commons and this almost autonomous device going from the streets towards the common areas and on top. And here you can see on the facade that you have this continuity of material from the greenhouse on top to the facade of the staircase, which is this polycarbonate, corrugated polycarbonate material, translucent and cheap, very cheap. And so, as you could see on the other photos that we showed, there is no outdoor extensions of or no balconies or no terraces that are private. All outdoor extensions of the housing are collective and shared. And so here the sequence of commons starts from the hall, it goes towards the garden on the back, and it goes up to this rather small staircase, but with some qualities, and on top the greenhouse and terrace.
So it's the opposite to fragmenting, to have the circulation, the interior, the stair circulation hidden, and then greenhouse on top, and then something else. Actually, we try to bring coherence and unity in the different floors. This is for us quite important, and that's why we insist with the sequence of commons, no?
And so this sequence starts with the hall, with this relation towards the streets that is very transparent, as you can see, with this sectional door that can be totally open. And it's we had the chance also, because it's a small-scale building, that fire regulation allows to have all the common areas open. So we have really this continuity of space in this case, from the ground towards the top. Also with the staircase, we were not compelled to close the staircase, and so the hall is an open space that can also have different uses. It's also a bike storage. You have everything you need in a hall, but also it can be used to have a drink or whatever. It's used for encounters and collective life. And so you see the proportion of the hall regarding the apartments on the ground floor. The hall and the garden are, let's say almost half or of the plot.
It's also important to say here that we are adding this sectional door for used normally for parking, but actually we have the structure there, so there is no way that we can enter with a car, no, and we don't need it actually. But the idea again was to find some coherence to the sequence of commons. As we have the polycarbonate, this more light kind of material, we wanted to have a more super direct connection with the city, and opening when possible, when there is good weather in Pantan.
And so the hall is, you have this extension towards the garden that is, and the hall is closed on this side with the big sliding door with the corrugated polycarbonate. And so actually you see really the sequence on the facade from the inner courtyard rather than from the street. So this is the sliding door.
Very simple
detail.
and cheap. Yeah.
And so the staircase, it's a very small space, really reduced. It's not like over scaled like in the Petit building that we presented before, but only with this facade. That is, it's a really qualitative space because of this translucent facade, and it's really used every day for collective life as well.
It is probably the most used in terms of collective life. It is the place where people is smoking a cigarette, we are drinking a glass of wine, whatever. Every day there is people, like neighbors, they go out, you say hi, and you stay 10 minutes. We were not friends, all friends in the beginning, and we are now a community of 13 people that we use a lot this place, no?
And so with this metal work here, it's very simple elements. It's like a metal mesh of 10 by 10, and it was, as you could see in the other photos, it was only folded and then assembled with elements from electrical devices that were. So it's a kind of bricolage, but that gives this beautiful elements in the center of this staircase also that adds to this quality.
And then obviously we arrived to the greenhouse, which is the main social space in terms of capacity also, obviously, but also it's the place where the propaganda of collective spaces appears more clearly towards the surroundings, no? Because you see when it's used, it can be during day or especially during by the end of the afternoon or during night, you see this lamp in the middle of this weird kind of very specific kind of context, no?
And so it's at the same time the cheapest space of the building and the most qualitative, because you are on top, you have this view and these great opening sliding doors. And it's a space that gathered several uses from the daily life. We have a kitchen and like laundry. You have 2 washing machines that we use there. Otherwise, the private housing units have everything, and they also have the connection for a possible laundry machine, but we use this all the time. And there is it's a space that is on purpose non-defined, and that can be used for a series of daily or more exceptional uses.
As Kim was saying, you have the same section, let's say profile in wood, very cheap and very not necessarily the way where greenhouses are being done here, let's say, in Europe, or let's say in France it's less industrial, let's say, and we have these cables, so we try to bring the full volume and open to change, no, and open to adaptation in time, no?
Yeah, and these cables also participate to like the small infrastructure of the common areas, as you will see.
So we see the relationship with the context again, and from the surroundings from one house of a neighbor, no?
And so there is this terrace in extension that is like the garden on top.
Yeah. But perhaps we are arriving to the end of the conference, huh? And it's important to say that in the beginning, it was not obvious to live all together. It wasn't obvious for us to live 3 partners in the same building, no? At one moment, we engaged in this process, no? We said, okay, we will live together and we have our community. And we have the chance actually to see the building in adaptation, in uses and changes, no? Which is quite privileged for us, and we just take photos for ourselves, but also we will share some of them with you. Actually, they are different type of photos, but the vast majority by us, but not only. So we see actually how the spaces are being used really in daily life. When Kim was saying about this one, when there is good weather in Pantin or in Paris, we can open the sectional door and we can have a moment there of when all the people is arriving from the work, whatever. We are seeing actually how kids are moving and how they approach to this structure. So this cage, it's used as a place for having fun, as the curtains, for example. So there are 3 kids now in the house, actually, two olders of 3 years and more or less, and they are quite using this space of life, let's say. We are seeing them grow also, and as the building, no, like opening big doors, closing big doors, bringing some.
Yeah, it's also these huge doors, sliding doors are. Since they are done in a very cheap way, let's say, they're also very light, and that they can be moved by a 2-year-old child.
Of course, the patio is the one probably the most enjoyable by the kids, because they are playing all the time there. Lalo and Anila, and there is another kid on the block, a baby, no? It's a place where, of course, pool and people yelling and kids yelling, it's happening all the time. We see also how people is using, even if it's very informal way, a small seat, a glass of wine and the cigarettes, and that's it.
Oops.
Sorry. We see also how light, affects the building. When there is a good light, the lights enter to the palier partagé and also by extension to the domestic condition. And of course, we see how this space has been used since the very beginning, even before it was finished. No, we were already living in the building, but it wasn't finished. This was, for example, the meeting with all the builders. That they did a great great work. Sorry, and then we see just people, visits, friends, architects, urbanists, and so on and so forth, that are coming here, and of course in a very friendly way, but also some people trying to learn a little bit about the project, and we are quite happy about it, no? Because we have the chance to discuss about these issues, no? You see also new babies coming, there are balloons, then big rugby match, there is a projector, and so on and so forth, no? We see also how life, let's say, how weather is changing and how time is passing, no? The same situation with the different colors from the cemetery. And also, it's a way also to still...
That's the views from the top greenhouse.
Yes. This is the views. Also, this is also, it's kind of obvious, but coming back to Glenda Kapstein definition, this is an in-between space. So it's living with the environment. If it's too cold, obviously it will be cold inside. It's not a stone wall. So we need to understand this, and we understand the possibilities we have there, no? But also when it's open and there is nice weather, you can have a nap there, or you can use it in many ways possible, no? It's a very quite generous living room that it can be used by all the inhabitants all the time. We see also here, it's important, we decided in the project not to have a system of shading because we thought it wasn't needed. And at least during the first year, textiles appear quite strongly for giving shadow, but also in the everyday life as we use the washing machines over there, no?
And for parties.
So the last part, it's about how we expect, or we are on the way to try to reproduce this, coming back to the idea of the self-commission, no? Or to try to look for designing our own briefs or be part of this decision.
Yeah, so La Maison Commune was for us the prototype of this parallel activity that we want to develop and to make, to, let's say, bypass the usual developer and their functioning, and to be to manage our own numbers, let's say, and to be able to actually so we somehow, it's not revolutionary in the sense that we are using the tools of housing as in the market, but twisting a bit the numbers and managing to give more common areas and shared spaces within the same system.
Can you come back to the because it's very important to say this idea of the entrepreneurial side of the practice, no, in parallel to designing projects and dealing with public competitions, private competitions, research, whatever. It's a way to find the ways of building or designing the projects we want. It's basically to find the autonomy and the freedom enough to take the decisions by ourselves without intermediaries that are damaging the architectural project. No, this is the basic. No, sometimes we arrive to work with developers and we are developing one project in a kind of good condition, but this rarely happens. No, and obviously when you design a house for somebody, it's difficult because it's their intimate life. No. This is what we show you in the Maison Commune. It's not a cooperative, so it's not a very engaged people looking for houses. It's actually that we take, in a way, the responsibility as architects to try to propose these spaces, no? And obviously, as soon as you go there, as you visit the house, all the people understand the qualities, even though you can find, okay, the polycarbonate maybe is too cheap or something like this. They understand the capacities of a model like this, no?
And also the model is of a foncière. It means that it's a real estate company, but that doesn't build to sell already when it's finished. But the idea is to keep it and to give it to rent. And it's also about affordable housing. The problem really, specifically in Paris, but in I think many places, it's the problem for people who just need to rent an apartment and not. And so the thing is to giving the possibility to rent an apartment with the same price that they would rent one with only a staircase to go to their place, to give them more for the same rent.
It is important to say that this idea of the Foncier Común is we have been dealing with since during the last year, and it's ongoing. No, so it's what you are seeing over there is actually kind of a summary, and we are trying to keep this summary and to keep this force actually through project by project. No, so we are actually developing already one. We are not arriving as private, as individuals to buy a house to another private, but actually we approach 3 cities in the surroundings of Paris, cities that we see they could be interested in something like this, and we approach them to see if they can somehow put some interesting plots to evaluate. And in a way, if they give us margin, a little bit of time for studies, we might have time to find the investors, no? But the idea is actually, is not that we architects, we suffer and we find the ways of bringing this sequence of commons in a impossible equation, but actually to try to find the conditions for these kind of projects to appear, no?
Yeah, and it's also not a co-housing project in the sense that it's let's say the idea is that also a different form of ownership, where it's a collective ownership, a bit, it can be compared to a cooperative, but in the sense that the people who invest don't live there necessarily, and if they live there, they are not owner of their apartment, but of a part of the company that owns the whole building. That's the case in La Maison Commune.
And we are totally, and this is part to perhaps a kind of a general conclusion, but we are totally open to deal with the contradictions in which we are now. We are trying to develop social housing, or we are building social housing, and we are trying to apply to more and more. From time to time, we go through cooperative competitions. We also do private competitions with private clients, let's say developers, trying not to be super conventional, but still. And then we look for self-commissions as the one that you see, the Maison Commune, but also the one we are developing with Adamo Faide in Uruguay. In the end, the idea is to find the conditions, specific conditions for each project to appear with this kind of will, no? So.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim and Felipe, for this fantastic presentation and also beautiful project. Although you shouldn't take too seriously my feedback, because some colleague told me that I'm usually too nice to guess. So
we expect
maybe you will
the
get more tough.
Bad cops over there, yeah.
Yes, but I have to say I stand to by my judgment. I think it's a really incredible project. I have actually a very simple question, which is, the use of color in your project seems to be very important. I mean, there is a deliberate use of color also to mark certain crucial moments. Maybe, I don't know if you can elaborate on that, because it seems to be a very strong feature in your projects.
Perhaps we can go through Lina Bobardi, no? Coming back to the definition of poor architecture, which is actually this idea of maximum communication and dignity through very humble means. So if you see the Maison Commune without the greenhouse and without the handrails in green, well designed, let's say, you will see it as a very banal and generic building, no? And we are adding these moments in order to reinforce, obviously, the qualities we want to highlight. It's about to bring roughness and more sophistication, it might be, but also because actually we are, and you see that there are very pragmatic decisions. So, for example, using the white here to gain lights and so on and so forth. But we are totally, let's say, interested to mark, to bring these small moments of bringing color, and it's not a subject. Obviously, the subject is to choose which color, and this can be endless discussion in the sense that we don't work with a palette as other architects that they know which color they will use or the tone. We say, okay, can be green, can be whatever, and then we discuss, no? So.
Yeah, we had several times for competitions the critic to make architecture without character.
Okay.
it's something that we are kind of proud of. But to these elements give the character to the collective parts of the buildings, be the facade or the common areas. And that's where we want to give character.
But it's true that the color appear, but what you are saying is quite important. The color appear, let's say, more strongly in the second phase of the practice as soon as we arrive to Paris, and strongly appear in Petit building when we decided to put the ceramic tiles to highlight that wasn't a, okay, that wasn't a, yes. Yes. So basically, it appeared as a cutout, and then we at one moment we evaluate if we should leave it rough or not, and we said actually we should reinforce the wood quality of this in terms of finishing, because obviously rough materials or rough finishings, they are not necessarily what the people likes actually. So if you leave them and you say you will have a palier partagé, a shared platform there, rough, and you know, like nobody will understand. No, it's a way also to bring some, I don't know, softness or.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Actually, following on this question, something that I wanted to ask, because I think that like your way of drawing, it's really relevant. It's really important in your practice. It's quite like you're one of the main character of the way you communicate, I guess. And you use a lot the colors actually in those drawings. And so if you can elaborate a little bit more on the way you communicate, the way you draw, and the way you use color as a tool, and so on. But I mean, thank you so much anyway.
Yes, I can start. Just to be totally transparent, no? When we founded in 2012 the practice, of course we were appreciating many different architects, many different ways of representation. We were somehow amazed by some architects using coded isometries, for example, to show the strength of the project, let's say, in terms of formal and geometric terms. We were very interested in the way architects were like interested to bring the context into the discussion, not to have the isolated building like as a artwork or something like this, to bring it in with the surroundings and so on and so forth. And somehow we understood, we founded Plan Común, the idea was to have a less elitist way of dealing with architecture. We thought the isometries, for example, they were quite interesting to share with other people. No, it's much more easy for a non-architect to understand an isometry than a section, for example. No, and then the color appeared again when we decided when we thought we should bring even more attention to the uses and to do this effort to recognize that there are plants, there are people moving, and not to offer this just a kind of just as a frame, but to imagine a little bit or to show a little bit the intentions of the project. And then the code is the code.
Also, the isometry is very interesting for us because it's like the most synthetic drawing where you can show the most from a project, the use, the structure, the facade, the context, and when you start to cut it, then even more. And also the idea is to let's say these kind of drawings, it can be done by anyone, and what we showed on one slide in the beginning, it's this Common Places project, this research that we did with a lot of people. Actually, these drawings look very similar, but they were done by many different people, and it was also a way to have a very simple language that can be also done very easily, and to be like not like the hand of, it's not like a croquis with the hand of a master or whatever.
And this is important because if you come back just briefly, we show you a series of things, essays of the same idea with different typologies, proportions, and so on and so forth. But we actually, for the building, social housing that we are building now, this isometry showing the sequence of commons, these vertical commons as we call them, palier partagé in French, no? This drawing appeared 3 days before the deadline, and we said we need to do it. But now actually many projects are starting from this drawing. It means that also the potential of understanding this kind of structure related to circulation, but also to share the spaces is quite key. And it can be really understood since the very beginning, since day one of the design process.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It's very interesting. I think the topics that you raised. Actually, I would like to take the things of the side of from economy, political dimension, because you also use some very important keywords like, for instance, entrepreneurship or investment or social housing in the the same framework. What you do, as you say, I mean, I'm referring to the Maison Commune project, especially not the social housing competition one, because it's rather, I guess, it rather follows the regulations, I guess, in the France, the state or the municipality, etc. So what I wonder is that I guess you founded a company yourself, and you are following and kind of, as you said, like inverting the model of social housing in France, basically, because you also use foncière, like crédit foncier, no? Is I think it's the same idea that people, I mean, the money is collected as workers' pension funds there, and then it's the idea of the social housing or the workers' housing cooperatives in France were utilizing at the moment back then. So I would question, I'm questioning this side indeed, because what you do is you find investors. First, I thought that, okay, investors live in this building, so it's like a cooperative. But no, it's not.
No,
and
it's
then
not a cooperative.
There is this, let's say, contradictory position, as you referred, especially in the very final words, that so then investors invest, and municipalities or local governments, they are also kind of investors, because you negotiate for land to evaluate or to develop further. And also you mentioned at a moment that the rents, I mean, the people rent these apartments, not the investors. It's the same rent, so that they find a nicer, or let's say, quality space, right? This is a very great thing.
Yes.
So it's perfect for the side of architects, let's say, for your office, or the autonomy of architects, that you can build whatever you like to build. But still, what I question, I'm playing the devil's advocate, and how can you differentiate yourself from a developer or building contractor, for instance, because what they do in general also, they find investments, they make negotiations with government, local governance, and then they sell. You don't sell, you rent, but it's the same price, so it's not social. So how do you see this point? It's rather to question, let's say, the social front of architecture, because it's very much similar to the cooperative model, but there are investors that maybe you can open it a bit further.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just, it's a bit,
For sure.
no,
What we maybe a few just a few things. On the one side, at the moment, two projects we have, the investors are somehow family and friends. They can be in Chile or they can be in France. We are not going to the big investments, to investors to tell the story. It might change, because as we are totally open to say, the diagram we show you at the end of the presentation is at stake. No, it's a process. So just to be totally open. Second thing is that actually we won the first competition after doing 30 public competitions in Chile and also in France. The first one we won was the social housing competition back in 2019. This year, after 5 years, the state, which is quite very interesting state because it's providing social housing, qualitative social housing in the French context, they took 5 years to start the project. It means the time is quite long, no? In a way. So you can say, okay, this is a matter, of course, we are dealing with these long time frames in architecture, no? But this is, if you want to do social housing, it might happen that it will be very long, no? And then the third one, and perhaps what you were saying, which is the difference in between like what we are doing and a common normal developer, is that actually we truly believe in our capacity as architects to design and to give a space for this collectivity. In any project, it can be a museum, it can be a social housing, it can be a private housing. It doesn't matter. We truly believe in our skills as, in a way, because it's also very important to say that that we founded, and we were working in Chile for 6 years with a kind of very critical position about neoliberalism and so on and so forth. But we need to understand in the conditions in which we are, and we try to openly to say that we try to find possibilities in this context. So for me, obviously, when I was saying the contradictions, of course, they appear. It is never the idea to say this is a cooperative, because this is not a cooperative. I mean, there is no problem at all. Cooperatives in Switzerland, probably, they are even much more generous, okay, in some of them.
Yeah.
But
you're right. We're playing with the same rules as the developer, and we don't say the opposite. What you see here on top of the building it will be like the BMW of the developer. By using and managing our own numbers, what I want to say, and by bypassing the developer, we bypass also, let's say, the functioning cost of the developer, and also the margin that they want to do, and all this profit that they want from day one when they finish the building. So the difference is there. By giving time to be rentable, we are also able to be less rentable from in the let's say in tea time, and so it's also how we manage to finance these spaces. So that's it's we are not as we said before, we are not revolutionary, because we play with the same tools and the same rules of the market, but we are offering, and that we are reclaiming and trying to advocate for more collective space and non-rentable space that can be used collectively in the collective housing buildings.
yeah, because this is quite important. The strong sequence of commons, you can say, yeah, but it's not a cooperative, it's co-living, and we can go there to a very long discussion in a way. But actually, it's not also that we, at the moment, we are playing with the same kind of rules that a conventional developer, which is looking for more profit. But ideally, we should find even better conditions, ideally, in the negotiation with the municipalities and with the investors and so on and so forth. Ideally, we should find better conditions, because we truly believe that this is the emphasis is on the collective and not anymore on the margin for investors that are not even living there, you know?
Thank you, fascinating presentation. No, I'm engaging a bit with this discussion before I formulate my question. I presume there are values also on you doing renting instead of selling. I mean, it's already in the housing question famous text, right? That, you know, we came to believe that being the owner of your place, it's a kind of the ultimate goal of a contemporary citizen, but already in the 19th century, that is also understood as a cross, right? Because it fixes you to a place. You know, not everyone, you know, can decide at that moment in life that they want to commit forever. So I don't see a contradiction between, you know, offering different possibilities of ownership and renting in relationship to a project that has some kind of, not necessarily social aspirations, but at least a kind of like different kind of fair trade. But in that context, I mean, you started with a very big social housing project, and then with this more like agile, entrepreneurial attitude. And we heard a little bit of the differences now when you were speaking about time spans of the duration of the projects. But I would like to hear more, if you can tell us more of your experience of what is really the difference of working with the French state, which is not any state when it comes to social housing. Yeah. We also know, I mean, maybe Sophie can jump in the discussion, that is the French state has been changing relative to, you know, the affordances of social housing. So I think for us as a school, hearing you is perhaps a privilege moment where you can tell us from the inside what are the beauties, the challenges, and how that does differentiate with the kind of model that you do, as I read in the meantime while you wait 5 years to start a new project.
First, it's not for the French state directly, because it's already something that the social housing companies are, in this case it's a public-private company that is, it's the city of Paris who is the main partner of the company, let's say. to simplify. But and so what it means is a lot of bureaucracy, of course, and a lot of it is also where. It's a special case because in this case, the project that we showed that is under construction, we have like, let's say, one of the most interesting clients that you could have in social housing, because they have also more capacity to invest in the new buildings, and so we have a very generous budget for social housing, which is not the case everywhere, but you have always this company for social housing that are directly related with the city. It's local government generally. For instance, in this competition, we had a specific demand on common areas, because it takes place on a site. It was a former hospital that were used after it was unoccupied for several years as like a squat, a huge squat, and there was a lot of emergency housing for homeless people, and there was a lot of different examples of common life in this compound, and so they wanted to somehow keep this spirit for the new developments. But even though we had to fight all the way through the study phase of the project for these spaces to keep them like this, to keep them as common areas, as open, and so even though there was on paper and like a political will to have more common areas and more ambition about it, it was when it comes to like how they will manage it in daily life after when people live there. It was like everything super complicated, and we had to really convince them once and again, and also we had the chance to work with the future inhabitants in this case. So at first they were totally against this shared space, and through several workshops and during the whole process, they defend them more than us, you know. And like, so it's really, and actually at the end there was also a debate about the facades, because it was extra cost for a space that was anyway exterior, but for it's also the condition for this space to be used as not only as circulation, but also to have more use, more collective use. And in the end, the future inhabitants defended it, and it's how we could keep them.
And coming, perhaps adding to your commentary, I will say we were based in Chile, where there is no social housing, in a way.
Yeah.
No social housing at all. No market. No. And then we arrived and we see some very beautiful collective housing, social housing developing in Spain, in Switzerland, also in France. No. But the thing, for me, perhaps is a little bit specific in comparison in between France and compare. Having a look to other cases in Spain, in Switzerland, in Germany, and so on and so forth, is that it seems for me, I'm foreigner, no, that there is an issue with the in-between condition of exposing the life outside. It means that when you propose a long balcony where you can have nice qualities, perhaps they will say, yeah, but people is bringing broken machines, so it will create a mess in the facade, no? Or for example, when we are using these generous spaces, they were saying in the beginning, yeah, but it can be, who will manage? No, it's not inside the apartments and so on and so forth. So I would say the relationship and how to expose life directly there, even in terms of the environment, because environmentally it's quite kind of extreme, no, for us, at least from Latin America. It's, I would say, it's an issue. So all the idea of the commons, I would say it has been the challenge, but after 6 years or I don't know, 6 years, it's more or less already something we can defend and people can understand because they say, oh, okay, they are talking about shared spaces and so on and so forth. But we are not convinced actually about the fact of having a polyvalent room of 50 square meters in the underground of the building or on the rooftop of the building, and that's it actually. The idea is again to bring more, very inspired by many French architects, but also specifically by Lacaton and Basal. The main difference is that the extra space they are increasing and testing more and more into the apartments is transferred to the collective area. This is the main situation, perhaps.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. That is very clear. I really appreciate that you skip the promoters, but you skip them twice. Once when you do it, you don't have to discuss with them, you don't have to negotiate anything, so you're really free and it's a way to emancipate your project. And twice, when you catch the money that you don't spend with them and you put it on the project. I've got just one question about your goal about economy, because when you offer this new space, you explain that it's really cheap, it's true, so it doesn't cost anything, but I think that in reality it costs to not build the two supplementary apartments, because when you've built the first levels, you've paid a lot of things that it's really cheap to have two apartments more. So I suppose that you are always dealing with this question about the budget, about the number of people who will live in the city, about how is your limit, where is your limit with this question of density, about cost? Because I suppose that with one or two apartments more, they will rent, they would be rent cheaper, and so I suppose that you perhaps the rules are not before making the project, but by this experience, how do you deal with this sort of political way to manage your own budget with your project?
Yeah, actually, it's all in the bilan, in the numbers, and we, as a developer would do, we do several scenarios from the beginning, and that's how also. I mean, the foncière format, it's also a way to extend the time before we get to the rentability, and that's because if we sell the apartments on day one, the rentability would, let's say, the numbers would not match, because we also, for the investors, it's like a low rentability, but it's still, let's say, in our, for now at least, we are trying to match the expectative of any investor, and to be able to be as rentable as possible for them on time, not as much as possible, but like the minimum that we consider it's like for them to get on board for the project, and of course then the other question is the price of the rent. Now we are working in with these projects. We are focusing in a specific area in Seine-Saint-Denis. Where you have like the rent are already regulated, and so there is you have a top price, a maximum price for the rent, and so we are in this. So this rent is fixed to be affordable, and so we are in this this logic for now. But it's true that. yeah, it's. I understand it's also a balance between how much space we offer and how much we then have to pay, and it's like the constant question and exercise before we start the project, and also because in this case we had to, of course, to demolish. It costs more money than what we expected at the beginning. And luckily, the investors were able to put more money. So in the end, we fell in on our feet. But it's always like a difficult balance. So I don't have a clear answer.
No, but in a way, just to add a couple of things, is that I take it back. It's on the one side, it's true that we are far from, as architects, no, not Plan Común, but as architects, we are far from being magicians, no. So we cannot solve a huge margin for developers, sequence of commons, good quality domestic conditions, and so on and so forth. It doesn't work in a way. At one moment, all the people needs to do some effort, no. I would say, in the sense when we are able to develop projects with private developers, as the one that we are developing in Strasbourg, we saw somehow this kind of specific attention, or they were listening us. But this is not it is rarely happening, no. The second thing is about the scale, because it's true that when visiting the place, there are people saying, yeah, but you know this will not work in bigger scale, because here you are a bunch of people, friends, and you spend your after the work you smoke a cigarette in the stairs, but this is not social housing, and so on and so forth. And we try to insist on the fact that the density, in terms of managing these different typologies of sequences of commons, is something that we could bring directly into the project. Just to bring you an example, we did the calculation. It's a little bit rough, but we did the calculation of, let's say, extra surface for the Petit project, the social housing project in Stone. We were doing more surface for, according to the brief, and it was around 9%. When we tried to transform the Tour de Poissonnière, that in the end Lauset won, we arrived to 13% of square meters, which are extra, and they can be appropriated in future, no? So this is actually, obviously, this is the most radical example in terms of ratio, because we have more than around 250 square meters for the shared, and around 330 or something like this for the housing part, domestic part. So obviously here is maximized, no, a little bit, but the attempt is all the same. And coming back to perhaps the idea of the entrepreneurial side, which I find super relevant question actually, is that there is a huge, I would say, a huge vast of example of people doing this from architecture field. And this is happening normally when there is no market, no public market. It means when there is no social housing, or when there is no financial market. You know, for example, in Argentina, all the wood architects we know, they have been working at this scale actually. And we went there, and it's amazing. It's a huge, amazing collection of cases where young architect has the contact of an uncle, and they manage to to have the site, and then perhaps the uncle is living there, and they manage to do a small operation that allows them to continue designing and practicing. No, I think it's a model quite interesting, and it's about when there is no the conditions for developing interesting social housing or housing in general. The way of going there, and as you were saying, Sophie, and asking for people, do you have some money, or do you have some money, is quite effective. And it's, I would say it's quite Latin American in this.
Now, just to understand, or maybe you can explain us, because in Switzerland, as architect, we can be our own developers. This is allowed, but it's not in France.
No.
So when you were saying what
Yes.
you're doing is...
Yes.
Yeah, that's. Can you explain what's the difference, and what's the kind of model you set up that's normally not allowing? And I think that has a lot to do with this social France in terms of social state trying to actually stop architects from being liberal, and it's probably in Switzerland we're much more liberal on that.
Yeah.
We don't. The profession is not even protected here, so everyone can be an architect actually. In Switzerland and build, I mean, not in Romandy, but in many cantons. But I think in France, there is really a very strong protection of the architect.
No, but there's very strong protection against neoliberalism, against self-entrepreneurship, which is, I think, so you made the step, or is it that you find a trick to go around, or is it something that's very common to actually do this?
Gaps.
I think there is a myth or fantasy about it, but that actually you can. The only thing is, it cannot be the same individual doing like the project and development. But since we are several partners, actually,
we.
Yeah, no, actually, no. Basically, you cannot have the same main partners in both companies, but you can have the same individuals in both companies, and it's not. You only have to declare to the Lord des Architectes, like the ruler of architecture, let's say, that you are doing it. But yeah, it's a kind of myth. I don't know if it's because of Pouillon at some point who made a bit of a mess,
But this is the story of Pouillon is even much more interesting because it's quite engaged entrepreneur. He was taking much more risk than a lot of people here in trying to design or taking materials and so on and so forth. And again, we see, of course, the project also when I show the archive of the videos, this is also a business. It's an entrepreneurship along with another Chilean architect. And of course, it's an editorial project, it's an archive, but it's also a business. It's a minor business, but it's still a business. And we are not, we can say we hate neoliberalism, we want that it will end neoliberalism. I personally believe that doing videos of architecture is not really, or the profit we have is not going to a kind of the neoliberal kind of way. It's just to have the spirit to find the ways you find a project, no? As we were investing a lot of time, we were investing a lot of time to try to transform the General Cemetery in Santiago in a metropolitan garden. We went to visit people, the companies in the surroundings. We visited the mayor many times and so on and so forth. We spent 5 years, and then there is nothing. There is no building, no access in the north, no metropolitan garden. It was just investment here. It's a format where we can ask to a friend in a dinner, do you have a little bit of money because we are... So
no, but there is still something in France which is like architecture is supposed to be of intérêt général. It's in the law, and so yeah, there is this idea that architects are not like any entrepreneur or any business people.
But no, for sure.
But because it feels you're defending yourself, where actually in Switzerland it's really normal.
No.
Many architects do that, and they don't need to actually argue, or so that's why
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even a debate. So why are people? Do you feel attacked, or you have to defend this position because it makes sense?
No, and then there is something Kim was saying in the beginning. Actually, people investing here actually, otherwise they will be investing in a, I would say, total cheaty apartment in the outskirts of whatever city near to Paris. And really, like we know the cases where like the apartments full of humidity. Yeah. So in a way, it's not that we are doing like the best for the world, not at all, but actually we take this money and we say, perhaps you don't invest in this, it's like you don't put it in crypto coins or bitcoins, whatever. You don't put it in a shitty apartment, small, without any quality in the whatever place. You put the money where it can allow something to happen, okay? But it's still framed in the regular conditions, no?
Just to go back to your answer, which I liked, don't you think that precisely in the moment when you assume this role of the entrepreneur, any reference or principle to the commons starts to collapse at this point?
Yeah, there are many. I think it's a very good question. I think that it's a very good question. But you know, like in a way, I'm not. I will not. Do not. We are not angry nor cynic. But we are part from a we were highly critical about neoliberalism in Chile, and we are still critical about accelerated capitalism all over, about how neoliberalism is arriving to all the places and so on and so forth. So if you ask me personally, like as a kind of, with some knowledge on politics, I would say there is a contradiction there. Because of course you could say, why you take the time of building this when you can do a cooperative or something more social, or reinforcing the commons where there are, no? Before to in a way, dismantling or something.
Yeah, but if just more than a contradiction, would it be even more liberating for the projects to somehow say, okay, it's difficult to achieve by a form, because even by the commons, if we take the Angelis or the last year's theoreticians on the commons, which is something that is also difficult to formalize, no? Because at the end there is the commons, which implies different practices and rituals, and then there is the attempt to make it in a building with very specific typologies. Mm. I wonder if saying that it could be more liberating to say that this project is more speaking about rather than the commons, is more speaking about architecture using references because of taste. So it's more speaking about us using Bruder, Lacaton Vassal, or Caesar, or whatever, so rather than to speak about the commons.
But then there is a misunderstanding there, because it's less about, I will say the main reference in this is the transfer that did amazingly Lacaton and Vassal, that found something which is totally, we respect a lot their practice in a way. But actually, it's not that we are very focused on providing, since the very beginning, through housing, nor through in a museum or public facilities, the space to maximize the collective space. And this is a strategy of the project. It's not the color, not the aesthetic by Bruder. This is something else. And of course, we are opportunistic, and if we can somehow take some models and we operate with them, actually. But the true thing is about the space in the end. In the end, here, we are talking about the quantity, in summary, the relationship between interiors and spaces for sharing the life, no? In a rental model format, because there are 6 apartments, we are all renting there, of course, but then there is this platform for the shared life to happen. So, of course, it has limits, and you can see some contradictions.
I don't know. I'm not sure I understood the question, but of course we could do something else with the same strategy. But we are convinced that commons are more and more needed in housing, and not only in housing, and it's also a reaction to what's happening in the world. I mean,
and I can tell you the spatial consequence. No, we were renting an apartment of 1,650 euros for 5 years, in the 5th floor, without lift, without exterior space, without any balcony, nothing in the place. No, 58 square meters or something like this. And now, in our case, we are renting actually in more or less the same amount of rent. No. Our house with more square meters inside, but also the square meters outside. We can have, for example, a birthday or something, a party there, when the kids, whatever, 30 people, and this is something in the end, it's a space, it's the available space that you find or not, if it's rent or if it's...
Yeah, this is an idea that among architects we have a lot of consensus, of course, because it's a very interesting project. The problem is that there are 2 different words, so the comment is supposed to be something that you don't stay for sex.
Yeah.
This is the main.
But I will.
It's not a contradiction. It's 2 different opposites.
Yeah. But in a way, what I will say is that, but you can say that it's a very interesting subject, and we totally agree that to discuss about it, it's quite interesting. But the question of commons, nor the question of collective life in architectural scene, I'm not sure if it's one of the main subjects, and we are discussing with a lot of architects. It's not necessarily this debate. It can be environmental, not necessarily. It can be something else. It can be aesthetics. It can be form, which is fine. Well, we deal with form, but actually, I think it still is a valid subject, and with all the contradictions or inconsistencies that we can find, no?
Or a bad use of words, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I have to say that, I mean, for me, the common is also this moment of debate and sharing of ideas. And I really would like to thank you for the generosity, both of the lecture, but also of the discussion. I think it's very rare that a discussion really can go deep into, problems that are also far beyond what, as architects, we can do. But I think at the same time, architecture really has this power to expose also, as you said, contradictions and issues. And I have to say I was very lucky to visit this building, have wonderful dinner in the greenhouse, and I was really impressed by this, especially by this building that looks almost like a sort of Lacaton Vassal take on a Greek temple. So I really enjoy a lot your building, and I hope you will all have the chance to visit. Thank you so much.
We are leaving there.